Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Fillman. And if this is your first time at the channel, welcome. This is where we talk about all things related to education in America and its impacts on the rest of our society. So it's not just schools, it's also what happens after our kids get out of school and go out into the world. So, again, if this is your first time, please consider subscribing to the channel so you can be notified when I make other videos. Also, please like and share this particular broadcast so more people can be aware of it and come and join us in the chat and ask questions and share their thoughts. And if you would be so kind as to consider also joining my locals community at thereasonwelearn.locals.com if you're interested in diving in deeper to these topics. I do have a live Zoom call every Wednesday, and we talk about things like homeschooling, we talk about public schooling, we talk about private schooling, we talk about all the things, curriculum, you name it. So today, I'm very lucky because I have in my studio the Virginia Warrior Mom. If you're not familiar with Virginia Warrior Mom, otherwise known as Anne, is that okay that I said?
That's perfect. Yes.
Anne. She has been fighting in Virginia for, more transparency in education and the government issues surrounding education. For when did you get into this? Tell us your story, basically, because I'm going to get it wrong.
I have plenty of friends that fought to get kids back in school last year, and I was still, when they went back to school, I just, trust the public school system, even though none of it made sense ever to me. And then August 10th, Chesterfield County, Virginia held masking and transgender, because we were under James Lane, one of the states that had the insane, because of Ralph Northam, transgender model policies that the General Assembly passed over to them. And Chesterfield County, their adoption was literally word for word. So we had the removal of parents.
You had like a masking meeting and a meeting about transgender.
No other county in Virginia did the two issues together, which when you allow 3 minutes on agenda items, and so when you have masking and transgender both on agenda, and so what happened is that because the superintendent had made a statement the day before on masking, 90% of parental comments were on masking, and transgender almost got, it pretty much did. I went in there ready, and because of my experience in child sex trafficking, to argue why it was wrong for all children, and got consumed with the masking thing.
Now tell us, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but tell us about that experience, just briefly, like for the audience who doesn't know your background in that.
Prior to this, I was working with Operation Underground, and I started learning about Hillary Clinton and the Safe Family Adoption Act and how the federal government was giving every state. And I started to pick it apart working with different nonprofits as a researcher, and started to pick it apart and found out that they were getting federal money, $4,000 to $10,000 per child if they're adopted out to a non-familial member in less than a year. And so when we talk about pipelines, CPS is the pipeline to child sex trafficking, especially for LGBTQ children in gender crisis. And that's why I went in there prepared to tell them that removing parents from this is opening them up to CPS. And so if you remove a parent and their voice that this is not right for my child to make this decision, you open the door for them to call CPS. And when CPS comes in and removes that child in gender crisis, the school board is not certainly going to take that child into their loving home. The superintendent isn't. They're going to go into the system. And Virginia is what I call there's like 11 states that have almost they get federally funded, but there's no state oversight. It's literally a free-for-all county by county. I call it, there's the dirty 11. No, dirty 13 is what they are. And, California, New York, they're all. And then, so once they go into the system, children in gender crisis, transgender children, LGBTQ, whatever you want to call them, within 48 hours, it's something insane. Like they're 36 times more likely within 48 hours to be in child sex trafficking. And so I think of things that way. So when I'm called a you know, a transphobe or a homophobe because I don't believe in this. I explain to people.
So they're giving them money, but they don't follow up to see what happened to the child?
No. Working with Operation Underground, when we would do, you know, recoveries, there would be children in the system that either their foster parent or the group home that they were in never reported them missing, and they were still collecting checks on them. That's how bad. CPS is something that nobody will talk about.
Okay,
And
so we may have to do in one of our series, folks, for those of you just tuning in, I forgot to mention that at the outset of the show, that this is going to be a series because Anne is the kind of researcher that has dug up like so much information. We couldn't possibly cover it all in one show. This was even news to me. Like that this, none of this surprises me, by the way, Anne, but like that you were connected to this, like that shows you how dumb I am. I didn't research my guest. My apologies, everybody. She and I were so busy working on this ESSER stuff that we were like up to our eyeballs in money things. And I just assumed like, well, she's the expert. So, wow. Okay. We're going to do another one about that for sure. Count on it. But today, this is also why this is so relevant, because what she's going to talk to us about today is the giant pile of money that is under what's called ESSER, which she's going to explain in a moment, and how this money is effectively being used to sort of browbeat and extort states into being ideologically pure or more aligned with what the federal government, I'm going to say federal government, even though a lot of people are going to chastise me and say Democratic Party, say DNC. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And Anne's going to explain why. And I even wore my shirt today. Do you see what it says? No. Okay. Do you see what it says?
I wore my 007 parent when we did. Okay. When we attempted bonds for the win.
Please don't feed the animals. No, all right. This isn't a partisan issue. This isn't a partisan issue. This is your taxpayer dollars in a giant pot, most of it printed, and they're handy dandy printing press. But anyway, your taxpayer dollars that are going, you know, the federal government, call it whatever you want. Okay. The people who'd like for states to go away and just have all the power, they are using that pile of money through the Department of Education to dramatically influence curriculum decisions and policies at the district level. It's bribery, it's extortion, it's whatever you want to call it. It's almost mafia-esque. Okay. I don't think I'm exaggerating at all to say that.
When I talk about RICO statute, people are like, whoa. And I'm like, exchange of money, corruption, racketeering, it's all there.
Right. And it's very important to remember that our Constitution neither calls for public education delivered from the federal government, nor does it permit the federal government to create any kind of national curriculum. Correct. The fact that it's been inching its way towards doing that for several decades now, actually closer to 50 or 60 years, is just because we, the people, have been asleep at the wheel, probably loving the fact that we had these free schools and all this. We thought it was free. It was very expensive. And we are just now waking up to the reality that there is this giant encroaching blob that is going to deprive us of our everything from our individual civil rights, like she's describing, like they'll come and take your kid away, all the way to states' rights, where there's, and you'll see some examples that she has where it's like, hey, Governor DeSantis, we need to have a little chat. We need a little President Biden wants to have a little chat with you about ESSER funds. So we'll get to that. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. So this episode, this part 1, is about the ESSER extortion. And then we'll move on to like other topics. I promise we'll get deeper into the stuff that she's talked about.
It gets deep.
Are we ready? It is deep. It's deep. Okay. So now that we've established who you are and what you've been doing and so forth, let's talk about first and foremost, what is ESSER?
ESSER is, there were 3. So it's ESSER 1, you'll hear it referred to as, and it's ESSER, and it stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Now, Trump did this with ESSER 1, which included CARES, which is Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Act. And then under CARES, but it's all lumped into ESSER is what it's called. But you had the GEAR money, which is the governor emergency money. And then you had the HERE money, higher education. Now this is all, we're going to talk about education, but overall, they were over $2 trillion was given to the entire nation for businesses. Whose businesses? We have seen nothing. Nothing that has changed, and so that was a minute. So we'll use Chesterfield County. So under all of that, Chesterfield County got, in a total with all three ESSERs, $100 million. 5 of that was under Trump. That was the only one that was strictly for COVID protection, things to protect children from COVID. Like I know the county bought $500,000 in touchless water fountains, air purifiers, but it's the only one that was actually for COVID relief. And then right before the transition of Trump coming out is when ESSER 2, and there was a huge step from that, and that was called Corona Relief Social something. It's CRSSA. And so ESSER 1 total was $30 billion given to the nation, dispersed. ESSER 2 was $82 billion. And then when you get to ESSER 3, which is the big one, in ESSER 2, you start to see the transition of it's no longer about COVID. You're going to start seeing it's all about there's transgender, there's equity, there's social emotional learning, because it's hidden under the fact of educational instructional losses during COVID is what they hid it under.
You mean the ones they said weren't going to happen?
Yes.
When we were begging for them to reopen the schools, I mean, even I who can't stand the schools, I was like, this is going to cause a ripple effect, whether it's real or they're going to lie about it. It's going to happen. And they said, no, and you're paranoid and that's not going to happen. There won't be learning loss. Then they denied that learning loss existed until it was suddenly the greatest crisis since forever. Yeah, that one.
But it's also these manuals, the only people who had learning loss were LGBTQ children and historically marginalized. So this is Black, Brown, Latinx specifically. Not even LGBTQ white children were affected by COVID. These
only LGBTQ brown children.
Brown, black, every other color. It's in like instructional law. There's the manual, and it literally has a graph, and it tells you, and it has every single color of LGBTQ children affected.
So the subliminal message is that if you're brown and LGBTQ, you're unsafe at home. When you were at home, you were in the most unsafe place you could be. School was the only safe place for you.
Yeah. They're coming
That's
after
why
Virginia
closing the schools hurt you the most.
Right. They're saying that now we're child abuse. People who homeschool, it's because they're pedophiles and they want to hide. Like that's the direction that Virginia's headed in a wanting to get rid of homeschooling because it's literally a mass exodus. Chesterfield County, after the August 10th vote that wasn't a vote, I have 2 recorded school board members stating that they did it prior to the meeting, which goes against a quorum and everything, due to legal counsel that they would get sued and they would have to give the money back. I haven't it recorded. So when we talk about the implications of what the truth of the COVID conspiracy, we have 4,000 kids pulled out immediately after. I know probably 8 or 9 of them, and my kids will be going to the same school with them next year because I have 2 girls. They will not be a part of this. 4,000 children. So when we talk about a mass exodus, and so that's why they're fighting so hard. But when it comes down to it, as long as we're working and tax dollars are paying for this, every tax dollar, if you pay taxes, you can go to people who think that only parents can go to school board meetings. Don't forget your money pays for this.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm always saying to people. Like my kids aren't in the schools and I still get involved because I'm like, what the heck am I paying for? My own demise.
We actually have more people without children, aunts, uncles, grandparents on our board of directors for Virginians for Children First There's
Yeah.
3 of us that still have children in Chesterfield County. 2 mothers pulled their kids. One's a grandmother, and the majority. But and so my knowledge that it was done based on legal counsel prior to the school board meeting. And I know that because I sat down and I tried to do the nice thing before I figured it all out, is that I went over to Hanover last night and spoke to them and told them this is not a county by county fight. It's not. I continue to go to school board meetings for accountability and public record. That this, I told you this, but it's not. We have 15 counties right now unified to whether it's the VDOE or whether it's Lane, because James Lane went from Chesterfield to the VDOE to now he's under Cardona.
Now, who is James Lane? Let's explain.
James Lane was the prior superintendent prior to the one we have now, Merv Dougherty. He was now within 5 years, he went from Chesterfield County to the state superintendent under the Virginia Department of Education. He worked with Northam, and he's the responsible for the transgender policy, the SEL policy. And then when Youngkin came in, he went, and now he works directly under the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, which is extremely frightening because this county took a hard left in 2017 when he came here. The equity committee was developed. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, do you feel like that is something that is happening? Because I've noticed that in other states where fairly high up people in key districts, superintendents, et cetera, are getting promoted to the federal department, and it's having an impact in terms of the power of the federal government then in that state. And so in other words, they're being almost hand plucked for promotion for ideological purposes. Am I gathering that correctly?
There are times where I have people contact me and they're like, we have this so-and-so that came from, I call it the mouth of hell, but I believe I believe that the county I live in is the mouth of hell because she is a critical race theorist. She believes in it 100%, Catherine Haynes. And now she's the Midlothian most affluent district in our county. So money does not mean anything. She's the one that literally believes like moments of silence for George Floyd.
Okay.
But she and Tim Kaine ran with Hillary Clinton, are besties.
Got it.
And Tim Kaine's wife sits on Ann Holton sits on the VDOE because we have 4 appointed by Northam, 4 appointed by McAuliffe. And so
that's something else people don't necessarily understand is each state comprises their board of education differently. I should say each state. Some do it one way, some do it another way. There's maybe 5 or 6 different ways to do it. But out of 50 states, you don't have one way to comprise your board of education. So it's usually a combination of some people appointed by the governor, people chosen by the legislature, and then often, somebody chosen by, the superintendent of public instruction, or, they have a different composition. And some are even have an elected person or two. Okay. But in Virginia, you've got appointed.
It's insane.
So these people are appointed. And once they're appointed, they don't necessarily leave.
No, it's 4 4-year terms. Right.
So I think that's the other thing people assume is that I'll elect my new governor and that person will come in and we're going to turn the BOE and it's going to be Youngkin's going to come in and he's going to clean house. It's going to be, that's not how it works.
No. That's like his day one. I'm going to ban CRT.
And see, here's the thing, guys. This is the thing. It sort of makes sense because you wouldn't necessarily want it to always go with the ebb and flow of the politics. No. You wouldn't want that. You wouldn't necessarily want, just like you wouldn't want the court to clean house every time a new president comes in. You would hope that people chosen to be on the Board of Education put children first, education first, and not politics first. That was probably the thinking when they did it. And it does make sense, except we live in a polarized time now where everything is political and people are 100% weaponizing the schools and our children for political purposes. So now it actually does make a giant difference that you have these extended terms and you've got McAuliffe holdovers that are sitting there that have a lot of power. and you can't just get rid of them.
No.
So this is just something really important, because I know a lot of parents don't necessarily understand, or there's a lot of push, and even people campaign on it. Like you said, elect me, I'm going to get rid of this or rid of that. They're lying to you. They're not telling you the truth. They can't do that.
Like the perfect example is Tim Kaine's wife. She is the VEA, which is the extension of the NEA, and we know what they stand for. She every meeting she's talking about the stakeholders, which is right now they're trying, already in 2 counties they've gotten collective bargaining status. And I know the CEA here, I have FOIA where they pretty much like Walensky or Weingarten with the CDC, like that FOIA where they made demands, and that's pretty much how it reads with Thomas Taylor, who is now in he was our deputy superintendent, but now he's the superintendent at Stafford. That's how I have a FOIA, and that the CEA, and they are essentially a club, and they only make up 13% of our teachers.
Right.
That they have ruled this county for so long. I was like, if they actually get status because of what they have driven in here as a club, essentially, it's done. Like
that's the thing. Is like this is just gone so far past like elections are going to fix this. What I would like to do, if it start with you, is because you did such a great job of writing up your notes as far as the differences between the different, you explain the dollar differences, and you high level explain the difference. But if it's all right with you, I want to just quickly go through what the allocations were meant for so people can hear. Okay. So the ESSER one, which Anne described as, the Trump ESSER. Okay. The 13.2 billion allocated by Title I formula to the states. This money could be used for things like summer learning, providing mental health services, educational technology, hardware, software, activities to address the unique needs of subgroups, which would have been kids with disabilities. It did allow for BIPOC students, okay? English learners, that makes sense, right? As well as students experiencing homelessness, low income, or in foster care. Now, if you're thinking about a crisis like COVID, these make sense. The BIPOC one, if they said to me like kids in poverty, but that's low income, that's covered. So I don't know why that was in there, but the rest of it, we could argue makes some sense, okay? Because those are the most affected situations and services. Then we have the next CARES Act. Now this is $4 billion for governors, a wide discretions on how to allocate it to K-12 and higher ed, libraries, and nonprofits. This empowered the governors to decide how best to meet the needs. So now it's up to the governor to decide. And this would include schools, including charter schools and non-public. So including non-public,
yes,
post-secondary institutions and other educational related organizations in the state, so that faculty could continue to teach and students could continue to learn. But the governors were deciding it. So assuming the governors didn't make political decisions is probably a pipe dream. They were encouraged to focus their resources on ensuring that all students continue to learn, most likely through remote learning. So this was also their way to kind of bribe them to continue to do remote learning. So if governors were feeling pressure to reopen schools, here's some money. Continue to be on the computer. So you might hear it as like, well, that makes sense. But now when we're now in gear and stuff and all these different things, it's like, stay closed, please. Now we're getting into this kind of bribery is beginning. And then when we get into ESSER 2, this is where the giant differences are coming into play, right, Anne?
Yes.
This is where and I'm going to let you respond after I just read this quick thing, because she did such a great job of this. I'm going to read it. This is $54.3 billion for K-12. Can be used in ways similar to ESSER 1 with the addition of the following uses to address learning loss. So now they're not only admitting there's learning loss, but they're saying, here's how you got to use it for the learning loss. Prepare the schools for reopening and projects to improve air quality, broadband, child care, I'm assuming for teachers, $10 billion, motor bus operators. Okay. And then some of that can be used on school buses. What's the rest? Not sure. Okay. So that's the first thing. What's going on here, Anne? Now this is just ESSER 2. We'll get to ESSER 3 in a minute. What's up here? That's pretty different. How does that address learning loss? Childcare, buses.
When they talk about the childcare and the buses, like I know that Chesterfield claims they spent $3 billion on new buses. We can't find it anywhere. And we've looked, and we're trying to get everything audited. And there's also a lot of stuff in these manuals that Cardona explicitly, and I think he did this to protect himself, is about transparency, is that the money needs to be transparent. People need to be able to pull it up and find out where it is. Like, we can't even FOIA the Freedom of Information Act because they shut it down. It's one of those clauses under the Freedom of Information Act that whatever it is.
$2 billion for what they're calling motor bus operators. And that's, remember, okay, so moving on to ESSER 3, this is the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA.
This is the big one. This is the
one, and I've talked about it. Justice Graves has talked about it. I think Unwokables talked about it. Lots and lots and lots of people have talked about ARPA funds and equity, ARPA funds and DEI and all this stuff. We're going to get into that also today. So the American Rescue Plan, this portion provides $123 billion, the B, to states to support K-12 education. 7.2 for the ERATE program. What's that, Am?
The ERATE, how much was that one?
That one is $7.2 billion.
I'll tell you. I gotta look at my notes.
Or E-rate. Is it E-rate or ERATE? It's like Target. I'm pronouncing it ERATE. Maybe it's like E-rate. Like it's some data collection thing. Well, in any event, $800 million to support wraparound services for children experiencing homelessness. Templates for state plans, including similar potential uses as ESSER 2, with the addition of strategies to safely reopen schools and assessment of the pandemic on students, and plans evidence-based interventions, especially for disadvantaged students.
Evidence-based but that's the thing, is that if you look at what the SEL programs and the evidence-based, we use Second Step here. And anybody that knows about SEL knows that Committee for Children, Bill Gates, Chan Zuckerberg, and Second Step are like two of the worst, is that they even link it. There's a link if you go into the manuals. It's literally, you just click on stuff and it tells you what it is that it says that there is zero evidence that Second Step works. Yet probably almost every county in this country uses Second Step.
Well, tell people a little bit, like, what is Second Step? Because there'll be a lot of people who are like, I'm not familiar. They might know SEL, like what it is generically, but they don't know what Second Step is.
So Committee for Children, you can look them up. They started out as a nonprofit years ago against child sex abuse. Well, bring in Bill Gates and Chan Zuckerberg and all these other people, the Bezos Foundation and all this other stuff. And they evolved into social emotional learning under Castle Social Emotional Learning. And then, so they're the nonprofit and Second Step is the for-profit, but they're the same company essentially.
So this is basically Second Step. As you can see, this company, right? Yes, and they're for-profit, correct?
Correct.
I
have the contracts with Chesterfield County. We also use Center for Collaborative Classroom.
Purchase.
Yes. Aperture. And this is when people talk, like, everybody remembers the Merrick Garland scandal, like, oh my God, Merrick Garland, but nobody knew what Panorama was. They just knew that Merrick Garland's son-in-law or whoever owned some company that involved children. So when I talk to people about social emotional learning, I'm like, remember that whole thing about Merrick Garland? That's what that was about, is that, so Committee for Children, and I've gone down the Twitter hole of seeing who follows who, is that, Ibram X. Kendi, his foundation, they're all connected. But so Committee for Children is funded by numerous people, but Chan Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. And if you have Bill Gates and Chan Zuckerberg attached to anything, you should have alarm bells going off, especially when it involves children.
They do this a lot. It's a little trick to get you to believe that evidence-based means something. They put a headline like success stories. And if you read it, it's like thousands of schools and millions of kids are benefiting from their programs. That just means they're using them. They're bragging that they were able to sell this garbage to people using your money, not their own money, not accountable to shareholders, not accountable even to anybody. Because they don't consider themselves accountable to taxpayers or parents, do they? So they just tell you it's a success story, that they're a successful company, and you're supposed to believe that means the product works.
Right.
But in point of fact, it really doesn't.
No.
It really doesn't. A cultural shift through social emotional learning. Now, you're supposed to think this is a good thing, like cultural shift. Did you ask for that?
No.
Did you know that was necessary? Did anyone try to sell it to you as those kids? We had COVID and now we need a cultural shift. Weren't you just kind of hoping they'd go back to school and learn math and English and stuff? Or did you realize that the COVID lockdown was so they could prepare to shift the culture? Because that's what they're telling you.
It's, let me pull up. I actually, under the Protection of People Rights Amendment, if you don't know what that is, look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me tell you how mad this county is that I found that and the Virginia forum to opt their children out. I was told it's only done during flex block. And I know that a lot of people have seen.
We're only collecting your kids' data 1 block out of the day.
And if you ask them, where's this going, school officials? Well, people don't know that school officials includes contractors, third-party vendors. They've changed the definition, like vaccine. So you tell a parent, well, it's only school officials only have access to this. And they talk about, personally identifiable information. And they say, oh, it's your social security number. They don't tell you it's their student ID.
Which ties to their name, which ties to their address,
Correct.
which ties to you, which ties to every little factoid about you. Oh, by the way, and follows them around for the rest of their life.
Correct.
This is conveniently attached to their Chromebook and their email address, which they conveniently gave your child.
And their RF chip that tracks them where they're going.
Exactly.
Like they got new
Your kids
Chromebooks.
Are cattle.
No, they got new RF. They got new Chromebooks because they had new software and new RF chips in them.
Yep. So to recap, $123 billion, large chunks of which went to a for-profit company that has ties to people like Chan Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Merrick Garland and people like that, who I'm pretty sure we know are politically motivated, okay? And has a goal of a cultural shift and is collecting data on your children and not letting you know who has access to or what it's being used for. Shall we continue? But by the way, you need this money because learning loss. You're a bad, mean governor if you don't take it.
But nobody had, like, if you read these manuals, no white children had learning loss. Like literally none.
But all that means is because the white children are being surveyed too. The white children's data is being collected. But the reason that's relevant, in my opinion, I want to hear your opinion, but in my opinion, the reason that's relevant is that it frames everything in a way that makes it impossible for you to criticize. See, like if you say you're against this as the solution to learning loss, you're against gay children, you're against LGBT, you're against poor Black children, you're a racist, you're a homophobe, you're all the bad things. Because the white children aren't included in it, you don't have a voice. You don't get to say. How dare you say how these children learn? Did you not know that LGBTQ children learn differently? How dare you have an opinion? So it's a way of wrapping it, in my opinion, in a little package where it makes it more harder to criticize for people like us to say, what the hell are you spending money on? And like, what's your take on it?
I thought it was like, and this is what I tell people is last night, I was in Hanover and they're so oblivious. Like they didn't like cisgender. They said, what is that? And I said, a straight kid, like has a name now. They were like, I was like, and so it's literally written into the Chesterfield County transgender policy that they're cis.
We should be glad it's better than normies, which is what they call each other.
Yeah. My daughter came home and I was looking through her Chromebook because that's what every parent should do is go through. If you still have your kids in public school and you're not going through your kids' Canvas and you're not going through their Chromebook and you're not finding out what's going on, you need to be. Because my sixth grade and she knew a girl in eighth grade who is gender fluid and pansexual in eighth grade.
Great. That's great.
So is that I thought it's CRT. I can explain it. Like when people say CRT is not in school, you have to, that's why I'm trying to get people to stop using the word CRT and to start talking whether it's critical social justice or something, because CRT is the philosophy, and then you have to have the marketing, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social emotional learning is the delivery system.
Right. But as far as why they had a claim, while they're making the claim that these programs are to help kids who are disproportionately impacted by COVID, they're making an unsubstantiated claim that these kids were disproportionately impacted by COVID. I don't remember seeing even a study being done disaggregated by race to see what the impacts of COVID were, never mind isolating that they know they're impacts of COVID, as opposed to impacts of COVID policies, impacts of school being closed, impacts of a million other things. And baked into this too is, once you do that, in addition to wrapping it in a nice little bubble that makes it harder to criticize, you also lay out the red carpet for hiring decisions that are 100% discriminatory.
Absolutely.
But you justify it by saying the students are disproportionately impacted. That means we need to diversify the educator workforce to look like the student body that was disproportionately impacted. You're discriminating against people in higher federal, and this is federal dollars now.
Cardona has a letter. Yeah, he has a letter, and it says explicitly, let me be clear. This money is for new teacher hiring, for training purposes, high quality substitutes. Chesterfield County spent millions of dollars. Now, have you ever heard of something called a permanent substitute?
Yes.
Yeah, I have not, because my understanding is that's a teacher. Because, but then we've been trying to go after them at different angles. Is that we go after their accreditation, because we know that there have been schools that have put administrators in the special education, teaching algebra, and then we found out that accreditation has been suspended for the last 2 years and has been indefinitely. And I didn't really think about this until I had multiple parents from blue, like New Jersey, that moved here and were like, your school system is worse than the blue state I just came from. And they were talking about how wonderful the reports were when they looked it up online. And then they moved here for that purpose. And that's when I pulled it up and found that accreditation has been suspended. So
where's the letter do you have that letter from Cardona where he says that? Tell me which one it is. Because I have a couple Cardona letters, but they're
it's what says dear colleague. Oh, I sent you all the one. Hang on.
I have Dear Superintendent Lane, but I have so many.
Too.
But the main thing I'm trying to point out to you guys is that they have all kinds of statements in this ESSER 3 that are now racially and LGBTQ oriented. And they are, let's not tiptoe around it. They're tying federal funds to discriminatory practices. They are giving preferential, either they're telling the governors or the boards of ed and whoever is getting these funds, because they have to apply for the funds. They don't just go, here you go, here's money. You have to send an application. And in your application, you have to explain how you're going to use it to meet the goals they've set forth.
Correct.
You have to agree with the goals. And then you have to further be like, I promise I'll do the thing. You have to be very Renfield-like and, I'll do the thing, master. And you fill it out, and then they get to approve it or not approve it.
Right.
And
I sent you North Carolina's, and I have Virginia signed by Lane. And this is all, like I said, you can find it. It's listed, and it has the application. It has the acceptance letter, and the acceptance letter is the one that has the little paragraph that when I found, it says, from Cardona to James Lane, Honorable James Lane, congratulations, your application has been accepted, but we don't know if it violates individual disabilities, IDEA, Civil Rights 1960. It gives you like 7 different things. And then he says it's up to Virginia to figure out, because he's abrogate responsibility.
This one. I can get it bigger.
But
so this is where let's see if I can get this any bigger here. Okay. So here's what he's saying. I'm pleased to approve Virginia's, ARPA plan and whatever. This plan, together with the unprecedented funding available, blah, 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 will help ensure it's consistent with all ARP ESSER statutory and regulatory requirements and addresses all the state elements. This letter along, blah, blah. And then it says, please be aware that approval of Virginia's ESSER state plan is not a determination that all the information included in the state plan complies with the federal civil rights requirements, including Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, blah, 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 blah. And then it says it is Virginia's responsibility to comply with these civil rights requirements. Like, they know.
Yes, this was the letter that was the aha for me.
It doesn't comply. They're covering their own butts that this is civil rights violation, but because they're going, hey, we're just supplying the money. Like, it's going to be Virginia's fault.
Right.
So this protects them in the future from, any kind of issues around it. And now it's on Virginia to figure out, how am I going to take this money, meet the requirements of essentially discriminating, violating the Civil Rights Act left, right, and center, but not getting in trouble for it.
They didn't.
There's only a couple ways to do that. One is to lie about what you're doing and reframe what you're doing and change the vocabulary of what you're doing. So parents and the other people who would be responsible to hold you accountable, school boards, etc., are just not even going to notice. That's not discrimination. They're disproportionately impacted. It's not discrimination. It's like special needs, guys. It's special needs now.
They've shut people up. They have made it. If you stay like me, I went in front of the board and they're all white. And I said, in the name of racial equity, since you're all white, by the next school board meeting, you need to step down if you're going to continue to force this on our children. But the fact that I stood up there and I'm able to say, because I'm not racist, by being not racist, because I'm not racist. But because I'm not anti-racist.
Not racist. You're supposed to be anti-racist.
But I know what I believe, and I'm on the right side of this, and I speak unapologetically. But so many people they are so afraid of being called racist or transphobic or homophobic because, listen, their children. Let's remember this: having co-ed unisex bathrooms is insane. Common sense.
Yeah. Rapes.
And it's not even about a transgender thing. It's a bathroom safety thing. Kids. And then you have teachers that can't approach a boy, not a boy that thinks it's a girl, but can go walk into and the teacher can't even question that child because it violates their rights. Not my daughter going into the girls where her biologically assigned. It doesn't violate her.
Right.
That's the insanity that we live in. And that's what all of this money and the SEL stuff,
and they're just like washing their hands of it. Like, here's a bunch of money to do things that we know are going to violate rights to make sure, but it should be spent this way or you don't get it in the first place.
Right.
And now it's up to you to figure out how to break the law.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's basically it. That's what they're saying. And, you gave us a plan and we approved it. Like, think about that, you guys. We, the federal government, approved a plan to give you billions of it. Well, in their case, I don't know, tens of millions of dollars, whatever. We're proving this plan. The plan's good. It passes muster. It's going to do what we asked you to do. Not our responsibility if it's constitutional.
Right.
That should never happen. Now, when you juxtapose that with people like Ibram Kendi, who want a department of equity, they want an equity department at the cabinet level to run every policy through to see if it's equitable. He wants there to be a secretary of anti-racism.
Well, Youngkin has made a diversity, opportunity, and inclusion.
Yeah, whatever. Same thing. And
that's how I feel about that.
And so, he wants this. And what our federal government is already doing, you guys, and we're just letting it happen, I guess. They are already acting like these laws are not theirs to enforce at all. Mm-hmm. They're already ignoring the people, what you said, PERPA and FERPA. They're already ignoring it. They never enforce it. Parents are the only enforcement mechanism. They ignore parents. They practically laugh at reports. They don't do anything about it.
Nope.
They don't do anything about violations of IDEA requirements. They don't do anything about Title IX anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's all, or except if you violate and don't let a trans female into the sports, then you're in violation of Title IX because she says she's a female. But the regular females that they were designed to protect, no, sorry, too bad for you, so sad. So an agency of the federal government is flagrantly violating the Civil Rights Act. And we, the people, are just I'm sure if I elect a new governor, it'll be all better.
I lived that. I worked hard to get, I was in the bubble of no man of God is going to run on the backs of parents and children. And I believe in humanity and principles. And for me, and he and I worked close enough that I told him, and I said, listen, and I said, I'm your ally right now. I'm not the enemy you want if we win this. And he kind of laughed and was like, and now I'm on the other side. And I will because he ran on the back of Loudoun County, a rape victim from transgender. The word transgender has never come out of his mouth, never. And so that has to bring into your head of why does he have a Secretary of Education who's the queen of data mining? And because what I keep telling people is that all the VDOE has to do until we can change legislation is revisit the policy, which they can do at any time. So with Balo and Schultz, and it's not Lane anymore, as the superintendent of public instruction, all she has to do is motion to revisit the policy, get an appropriate bipartisan committee, log cabin Republicans, whatever, because as insane as it is, there's things that we can do, including the SEL legislation. It doesn't say it has to be Castle SEL. The legislation only says that it has to be SEL. So they could, if they actually cared, easily do something about it and not wait till next legislation or we get another Senate. Right. It's that easy. Is that all they have to do is that's the ed code. That's the one, the roadmap. And if you open that up, it's a link and you just click on the things that they highlight. And
so like all this stuff?
Yes. And it will tell you like community schools. And then there's one down below and it just says LGBTQ. So I was like, okay, what's that? Clicked on that. And it talks about all the ways that an LGBTQ child is his experience during, and I'm like, that's what every child went through.
Yeah. Where is that right here?
Yes. Click on that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're going to click on that. Oh, look what we come to, the Trevor Project.
Yes.
That's not biased at all. For those of you unfamiliar with the Trevor Project is quite controversial. It is not the be all end all, only thing to look at. Their contention is where you get the idea that if you don't affirm, kids will kill themselves.
Yes.
So they have taken suicide statistics. That the big criticism of them is they've taken suicide statistics and they have selectively reported them in such a way and twisted them around to make it look like it's like a straight shot. It's not just a correlation, it's a causal effect of not affirming equals suicide. So they've scared parents, they've scared caregivers, they've scared people into this. Now, this so if you click from the government's own handbook on just LGBTQ, you come to an extremely polarizing organization that is by no means, it's not neutral.
No.
It's hotly contested by scientists, doctors, psychiatrists, you name it. There are people, granted, a lot of them are being told to shut up and they're trying to silence them like crazy, but this is what they're relying on. So this is 100% political activist organization. Okay. That's very important to note. Then they have your implications of COVID-19 for LGBTQ youth, mental health, and suicide prevention. And now this is where you said you're like, so you see it's the world's largest suicide prevention, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is where I believe you're talking, Anne, and you're saying this stuff happened to all the kids.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look at what it says. COVID-19 has serious implications for the mental health of LGBTQ. No, what you mean to say is COVID-19 policies. The illness itself does not. Okay. Although young and young adults are estimated to have the lowest mortality rates from COVID-19.
Oh, they admitted that. Look at that.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. There it is in writing. They're not immune to its consequences. Again, they're going to keep doing that until it's so automatic that you take it for granted that you don't go back and say, stop attributing it to the virus. The virus is a virus. It's just a virus. What caused all these issues? I don't see people having learning loss from H1N1. Right. Why is that, I wonder? H1N1 kills children. It kills teenagers. Yes. It kills young adults. It kills anybody that gets it and doesn't get proper treatment. H1N1 is very deadly. I know people almost died from it. Yes. Young, healthy people. Yes. Okay. So this isn't the virus. This is the policies that did it. And they denied it for so long. Parents are like, reopen, you're going to have learning loss. They denied it. Okay. So now they're saying the consequences, including as it relates to mental health and well-being. To Anne's point, very well taken. Show me the kid that doesn't apply to. Do you need
My
to
daughter
be LGBT?
is completely, she's 11. And I had the day that we had the unmasking in January, the night before, she is not like me as like, my youngest would roll in with it and be like, but my daughter has been bullied. This county does not care about bullying unless you are historically marginalized. And so this county has failed her, but then I had to drive her to school. She was shaking.
Right. And this is a misleading thing too. See this? Where they say that LGBTQ youth have been found to be at significant increased risk for depression, anxiety, substance use, and suicidality. That is true. What they haven't told you is that LGBTQ youth, and especially with the T part, see that because they shoved the T and the Q in there, it's not necessarily the L and the G or even the B. Because
they don't even really care about them, is the truth.
Right. Like, they really don't.
Yeah.
That T, you might as well have it be GC, right? Mm-hmm. Like gender confused. Okay.
Right.
That the comorbidities of that are depression and anxiety, very often autism and things like that. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? That's first of all. Second of all, this population is still supposed to be, anyway, they keep making more every day, a minority population. The majority of children who suffer from anxiety, depression, substance use, and suicidality are not LGBTQ.
Right.
They may be at increased risk because, like I just said, there's comorbidities that are already existing. But kids in general, as we've seen over the last 10 years, have, especially public school kids, but all kids in this age range have high rates of depression, anxiety, substance use, and suicidality. Those numbers have been going up from before the pandemic. And now they want to attribute it to this. They are conflating a couple of issues. And I have a personal pet theory on that one, that aside from their political goal of, the trans stuff, they are trying to cover up their academic failures, and not just academic failures, cover up the fact that there is a causal relationship between schools and depression, anxiety, substance use, and suicidality. And when one way they can cover it up is externalize it.
Yes.
COVID, LGBTQ, something, racism, something else. It's never them. It's never the total lack of leadership. It's never the total lack of discipline. No. It's never the lack of knowledge-based curriculum. It's never the teachers who are like completely incompetent and terrible role models. No, it's never that. It's the parents, it's everybody else. But now we can take that, build on the cover up, and also advance our political agenda. Yeah. But this is all children. This is this
goes back to child sex trafficking, is that we know that the age of reason, kids can't even connect cause and effect until 6 or 7. But a kindergartner goes in at 5. So if they don't have the age, if they can't connect dots, how in the world are you going to allow them to determine what gender they are? But the scary thing is that they have cracked the door open by removing the age of consent. And how in the next year, and I'm not a prophet, NAMBLA or somebody is going to kick that door open because you've said children can determine what gender they are, then they can decide what they want to do with it.
They're saying children are sexual beings.
Yes, exactly.
They're saying children should be doing things to themselves. I mean, they're teaching it at younger ages. I mean, if you're emphasizing sex for pleasure, sex for fun, children can choose their gender. Children know their own mind. Children are, you can't vote, you can't smoke cigarettes, you can't drink, you can't drive, you can't even get a piercing or a tattoo. But by all means, make permanent decisions about your physiology and whether someone is going to sexually molest you or not, because that's essentially what it is. If you are an adult and you're with a, significantly, I'm not talking about a 17-year-old here. I'm talking about a 5, 6, 7-year-old, even an 8th grader. Okay. There's something really wrong with that. Okay. There's just certain things that are just societal no-nos, and I'm going to die on that hill. But this one too, The research report outlines ways that physical distancing, economic strain, and increased anxiety related to COVID-19 policies may impact LGBTQ youth. They're only concerned with that.
It's all
Remember,
children.
these are public schools. They're
That's what
public
made me so
schools.
mad, is that I'm sitting here thinking of physical distancing, like POW status. Like, my daughter was traumatized that somebody was going to see her face. And it has nothing to do with whether you're LGBTQ or what color your skin is. All children have gone through such mental distortion for 2 years. This entire generation will never forget what they went through, but they have completely left out. And so everything about this made me so angry, because it's every child.
Parents of non-LGBTQ kids, did you know that decrease in positive social interactions had like a special effect on LGBTQ kids?
Right.
You know what it did? You know what the decrease in positive social interactions did for a lot of kids who didn't know what the heck they were? They went out on Tumblr. A lot of them because parents weren't paying attention, or because the distance learning was like, here on your Chromebook, go here and watch these videos, et cetera, right? So they were getting sucked down into rabbit holes on Tumblr and Instagram and TikTok, especially TikTok, that were literally making them suicidal.
Which Trump tried to get rid of. And that was one of the first EOs that Biden, we're going to bring TikTok back. We're not going to ban that anymore.
And that was every kid that had TikTok. It wasn't just LGBTQ youth. That was any kid that had access to these things, that had the smallest propensity towards depression or anxiety, which is a lot of kids, especially going through a pandemic where they can't see their friends, can't see grandma. Maybe grandma died. Maybe your dad lost his job. Maybe somebody lost their business. Maybe you haven't been outside in a month because your mom is a hypochondriac and wrapping you in bubble wrap. I don't know. Maybe you got a sniffle and mom stayed away from you for 2 weeks and was slipping crackers under the door because she was terrified that you were going to get sick. But no, you're straight. It's fine. You're good.
Yeah. My daughter, during the pandemic, I am very anti everything social media, because I do not want the world to have access to my child, and I don't want my child to have worldwide web access. But she and the girls she played with up the street, they wanted to make videos, and she had it for 2 days before somebody told her to go jump out a window and kill herself. She was 9. 2 days on TikTok. And my daughter is a straight white girl. So
I just thank my lucky stars that, my youngest is like tough as nails for some reason. I mean, I don't know where she got it. It wasn't for me.
That's how my youngest, my 5-year-old is.
But she started, she was in this forum. She stopped being in it for like her favorite band that used to be BTS. It's not anymore. And there were people referring to the white kids in there as snow roaches and some other names. I don't remember. Snow roach stood out to me because, as a person who grew up Jewish, anybody who compares humans to roaches, my warning bells go off. I'm like, vermin, rats, roaches, bugs. We're talking genocidal language here. These kids are tossing it around like it's no biggie. So this is all kids. This isn't just specific to them. All right. So that's that part of the lovely manual. I'm going back to the manual now.
Yeah. Okay.
What other charming things should we look at? This is ESSER 3, right?
Remember, this is ESSER 3. This is the big one that people talk about, the roadmap. But
this
they talk about, you'll get to the part that's like blatantly like, huh? Keep going. Yeah. Oh, that's always fun. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Much. They're talking about meals. They're talking about, and that's
the thing is that they put this squished in between the madness. They put this thing about, well, we're going to give kids so that parents stop reading. They're like, oh, well, what can be bad about feeding underprivileged children? Or, and then we get to the feeding of social, emotional, and mental health needs of students. And then it gets really interesting.
Did you guys know that? I mean, I say it every time I see it. Every time it comes up in educational documents from the federal government. Were you aware that your federal government's job was to ensure that your schools were meeting the social, emotional, and mental health needs of your kids?
But
did you know that was the federal government's job?
Why would anybody question that?
Yeah, it looks so official and pretty. And it's like we are so far removed from even what the original Department of Education was alleged to have been for,
right?
Which was to, extra protection for civil rights because of whatever. But it was a gimme to the unions. We all know that. Anyway,
Yes.
we have gotten so far afield. I look back on the days of complaining about Common Core and No Child Left Behind with nostalgia. I'm like,
Yeah.
gosh, can we just go back to when my biggest worry was the box method of multiplication? And not that my federal government, that the long arm of Big Brother was reaching into my child's brain.
Like, it's like the same people that talk about, standardized testing, because how can you standardize anything for children? Because it's what? Racist. Now they don't understand social emotional learning is standardized because everybody uses the one standard system, which is CASEL. And CASEL is done through a lens of equity and social justice. And so if you're going to standardize, so literally there is nobody in this country that uses any kind of social emotional learning that is not CASEL.
Research on the science of learning. I have to click this.
Yeah.
Where's Adrian? Where's my buddy Adrian? We are going to do this study. We are going to do this study for sure. Science of learning and development as synthesis. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that one at some point, y'all. So anyway, and this is going to go back to the beginning. I apologize. But yeah. SEL. Where were we? And CASEL. Did you want me to bring up anything from CASEL, or do you want me to stick around in here?
There's CASEL in there when you get to the social emotional learning. But
wait, did I skip it? It's back at B, isn't it?
I think B. Go down.
Here we go. So CASEL. Okay.
No, the other manual actually explicitly says CASEL, but one of the ones that says social emotional learning, it takes you straight to CASEL.
This one?
Possibly.
There it is.
Yes, there we go.
There it is.
Straight to it.
Now, is
the other manual is the one that is explicit.
Is CASEL profit or nonprofit?
Nonprofit.
This one's nonprofit. And who is on our board of directors? Let's see. Who do we have on here? Anybody important? Anybody? No, I don't think I see anybody like super important. Or where are the supporters?
That's where you have to find the funding.
Look, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Right. Isn't that interesting? Huh. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. All these foundations.
Fund the program that is telling our children their moral code, one moral code being taught to all. If you don't see the indoctrination, the problem is one program funded by Chan Zuckerberg and Bill Gates teaching your child morals, all children, because it's now in the money and it's in the state. It's from the VDOE and the General Assembly of Virginia. It's in legislation. So you now have something, Bill Gates, all of that social emotional learning, if you don't understand it, it is teaching children one set of moral code, and it's not yours. It's not your parents.
It's not only not yours, it's not individualistic. It is explicitly group oriented. It is explicitly, and it's not just, how anti-racism is like, there's no such thing as a non-racist. You have to do the work and be actively anti-racist, which basically is code for discriminate. Okay. Well, transformative SEL, which is what this is at this point, is it's not even good enough just to be a team player and follow the group values. Yep. If you're not actively promoting that out in the community, if you're not an agitator or an activist, you're not doing the work. I'm sorry. You're not a virtuous, good person. You have no character. It's not enough to just be a good person and be empathetic and care about your collective.
Yeah,
that's not even good enough. You can't just be, I'm a regular communist. No, you have to be an activist one. You have to be a Bolshevik. So they say here, right here, collective goals. This is literally what they're saying. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities. Manage emotions and achieve personal and collective goals. What's a collective goal? Okay. Feel and show empathy for others. Meanwhile, they're not showing empathy for the children at all.
But their definition of empathy is in kindergarten in Virginia, because it's K through 12. Go to the VD. You can Google VDOESEL. It'll take you right there. And it's K through 12. And by the time that you get to like early high school, there's literal, when they talk about, citizen, whatever it is, relationship skills with others. It's activism. Like it's literally written in there.
Yes. And it says SEL can help address various forms of inequity and empower young people and adults to, they're equals now. There goes bye-bye consent. They're equals. They're just equals. Yeah. They're co-creating here. They're co-creating knowledge. That's constructivism. And they're co-creating thriving schools to contribute to safe, healthy, and just communities, meaning justice. By whose definition exactly? We live in the United States of America. This all presupposes that it's terribly unjust, it's terribly unequal, and that if we don't do this, it's going to be worse. It's going to be terrible. Like, so for all these decades that we've made all this progress, we had a black president for 8 years. I know people love to get on me about that. Like,
I said that once. That's your white fragility showing. I get it, but it's
progress. What?
Right. That's your white fragility showing.
Whatever.
Whatever. That's what I've been told.
So it's my fragility. To me, it's my observational ability to see progress. I'm not progressophobic.
But until everybody progresses,
that's not real.
But until they all progress, that's why Winsome Sears, Barack Obama, Oprah, any of them, none of them matter, because until they all succeed, none of them succeed, which is what all of this comes down to.
Okay, I'm waiting for the definition of success. They can't all be Oprah.
It's like belonging. Belonging. I heard you say that. What does belonging mean?
Yeah, like what does it even mean? Okay, so I think it's more of a belonging to, not a belonging to the government.
Right.
And so this is Castle, and I've talked about this on the channel. There's numerous videos. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but to Anne's point, one company and the Trevor Project. Social emotional learning. It's all about politics and social justice. And this is in their recommendations. Remember, these are the recommendations for safely reopening. So apparently you can't safely reopen a school. Did you know that? You can't safely reopen the school, which means you can't have this money, because the money's for safely reopening the schools. So the money is tied to the goal of safely reopening, but safely reopening isn't what you thought it was. It's not. You thought it was like, open the buildings without germs everywhere.
But the key thing is that all the literature, it says no less than 20% of the money received by each LEA, local education, so that would be your county or your city, no less than 20% must be spent on learning loss instruction. And it point blank means no less than 20% must be spent on social emotional learning.
That is a lot of money.
Yes.
When you consider
the kids, for children broke it down and said, here's how much you can spend on SEL based on this one, and they listed like how to manipulate the money literally, and how many millions of dollars based on this part of it can be spent toward that social emotional learning.
And this is, none of this is word salad. Key evidence-based practices that maximize students' social, emotional, and academic benefits include, and they all basically say the same thing: creating a framework for meeting students' social, emotional, and academic needs, building strong and trusting relationships among students, families, and educators. Word salad, word salad, word salad, word salad. So where else should we look at here?
PBIS, positive behavioral. PBIS is one of those for a lot of people that don't know about. I know about it because a teacher brought it to my attention that our Meadowbrook High School is our worst performing and always has been. It was our pilot school, and PBIS is like the framework for all of this that we're saying. It's the carrot they dangle that no child ever gets to. It's the positivity, like, hey, if we don't cuss in class today, everybody gets free extra cell phone time. It's rewarding children for things that children should already be doing. And what it creates is all this constant reward and no ramifications ever, because they don't ever get to the top, is why the high schools are in utter chaos now. And the fights, and we had a walkout at
thank you for not beating anyone up today.
Yeah, exactly.
I've been in schools where they actually thanked the students for showing up to class.
They walked out, hundreds of them, in protest, and protested for like an hour, and the same school. Now, so this is 2009. So when they say that research based, after 13 years, that this is now they're even more underperforming and their behavior is worse. For this county to still say that this works and it's performance, that it is research based, and the fact that they are still doing it is insane.
But it's a pretty triangle.
Isn't it?
But Anne, it's pretty. And it has like, look, it's got a website and it says multi-tiered. Multi-tiered sounds important, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds like something I don't understand, which means it must be real.
Correct. If you don't understand
tiers, and there's multiples of them.
You're just a parent. I'm a teacher.
What do I know? There's a triangle.
Other people.
It's got lots of colors.
So PBIS
it has key components. They use the word components. All I have to do is throw the word evidence into something. I don't have to actually show evidence. I just have to like put it there saying it's evidence-based because we said so. It is. Trust us.
When I found our county contracts, I sent them to our director of constituent services. And he, when I said, where is this data on my child going? Like the example of them asking what prescription medication was in our house, and then told my daughter to Google search for drugs that they told her to go look. So data mining, they have it on parents. And he said that the companies they use are vetted, well vetted. Well, he and I have a relationship that I sent every screenshot of every, because it's second step. It's Committee for Children. It's
briefs for policymakers.
There's briefs for everything, like
leveraging short-term funding to build long-term capacity.
Leveraging is
that's a fancy way of saying spend the money you have now to create underfunded mandates later so you can have bond initiatives and raise taxes. An overview of Andrew F. implications for embedding culture responsive practices in Tier 1, Tier 2 data systems for policymakers. Great. Okay, that's good. Do we want these? Is this a private company? Is this a private company about a concept? Who is this? No, these are just different states. These are coordinators. What is the thing?
Who is it?
Who are these people?
A lot of times they're all connected. Like the nonprofit will own the for profit, and then it kind of trickles down from there.
This looks like it says U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education Program. Well, if this is the Office of Special Education Programs, why are they coming up with policies applied to all the students? Why are they remediating all of the students? Questions that need to be answered. It's just, it's one of those things. I just like to toss out questions that it seems like nobody's asking because nobody is. Anyway, all right. Where else can we go? That was fun.
The yellow one. You can keep going, but on that one, it gets really gross when you get to like the 20s and 30s, and it'll pop out at you. There's you just missed it. Go back up, right above in that area. The school climate, all that identity safe classroom. That's a good one. You'll appreciate that. So go back down, go down. Oh, families of color experiences. And then underneath that, I think is identity safe. Oh yeah. Identity safe classrooms. Identity, which is what they're teaching our children. Identity safe.
Dissolve stereotype threat by emphasizing stereotypes. Is that how we do that? Because that's kind of what it sounds like. If we're going to constantly focus on our differences, I don't feel like that dissolves stereotype threats, but okay. And increase identity safety by affirming all types of identity. Here's an idea. Don't talk about identity, and you are thereby affirming all types of identity implicitly. Yeah. Sometimes with children, what you don't say is more important than what you do say. But anyway, inviting students into self-authorship and creating identity-safe classroom agreements. What they're really saying is inviting the children to create their own identity out of thin air with things you give them as suggestions.
Correct. Yep.
So this is hogwash. Please note the date, 2016. So for those people who are like, oh, this is brand new, where did they come from? No, this has been going on a long time. And people probably saw this once upon a time and were like, Yeah, identity. Like, that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, they must know what they're talking about. It's edutopia. The topia part should give you pause.
Dystopia.
Yeah, that should, or even utopia. Okay. Identity safety. What is it? Identity safe classrooms are those in which teachers strive to ensure students that their social identities are an asset rather than barrier to success. When was that not the case? Please explain to me where those teachers were. They were going, you're Black and that's going to suck for you. Okay. So, and you're Asian.
Never.
I
Nope.
expect an A. So
I hated my
when
white
did this
teachers
ever
more than
happen?
anybody. I mean, growing up, they were mean, and like, it's not. But Chesterfield County has a program called Mirror Me. And part of our equity committee for 2025, now granted that's 3 years away, we have an 18% Black teacher rate. And we're pretty much 50-50 here. They want to have 50-50 Black to white teacher in the next 3 years. The only
there
way that
aren't 50% Black people in the country. We will not have enough teachers.
That is their goal by 2025.
Wait. We'll have enough teachers.
We're going to get them money.
Want them. Where are we getting them from?
Correct.
The local. Okay. Anyway, so going back to what I said about like when you read this stuff, parents, please stop and say, where was the evidence this wasn't there before? Where were all these kids? Because you remember the line on academic achievement is going like this for all groups.
Yes.
Actually, that's not fair. For some groups, it's flatlined.
Well, you'll
but
always
for the
have
groups
the
that
kids
used to
that
be
are
doing
here.
well, it's going like this. So this is how you get equity. You mow the grass. You just get the top ones come down to where the low ones are already flatlined and everybody's equal and everybody's equally miserable, I guess.
Bring one up to bring one down.
Yes, but this is not do away with grades, do away with tests, do it. Look, we're all doing well. But this, the suggestion, if I were a teacher who'd been teaching for 20 years, I'd quit on the basis of being insulted alone. I'd quit on the basis of saying, well, you've said that I have completely failed at my job. I better go do something else. I'd be better off mowing actual grass. Yeah. That's actually something that makes the world somewhat cleaner and prettier or whatever. But, mowing children's brains is not in my job description. And then they're saying, it says, I would venture, having been an educator for 20 years, this person was an educator and a parent for 10, I would venture to say this is not the norm. The students don't feel included. Okay. And identity safety is a critical feature of equitable classrooms. I don't even want to click that. The stereotypes have threat, increasing, name and affirm all types of identity. Emphasize our differences. That is definitely going to help. Model strategic vulnerability. Why would you do this? This is abuse. You do not call out vulnerability in impressionable young children.
Day one.
This is so abusive.
They asked
this
my
bothers
child,
me so much. I can't even tell you.
Are you a leader? Are you a follower? Do you have friends? She's in 6th grade. The worst time in any girl child's life, 6th grade, middle school. First day of school. I didn't know what any of this was. And then it goes on and it says, I generally am well liked. And then it says, I'm generally not well liked. And then it says, I have significant parental figures at home. You're asking an 11-year-old who may have gotten into a fight with her mother that morning. And then you're going to ask her if she has significant data mining. Hello. If your child, and then it went on to all of this other parental.
Notice too, the framing of the questions. Okay. My identity is that I am. Okay, so first thing is we've got a young child declaring themselves something that is probably immutable. I don't think you can say my identity is that I am a lover of baseball. Okay, right. Like that's not gonna be what I love about being. So now the message to the child is there better be something or I have an empty space. Now I'm gonna feel like crap.
Now most of this stuff is in group activities too. It's group activities, so it's conforming. Like you're not gonna, if you're as a child, you're not going to speak up against.
Right. What is something hard about being? That's declaring there is something hard about being whatever you are. Again, if I don't answer this, there's a blank, and they've already told me there is something. What is something hard? If you say nothing, they're going to be like, "Oh, surely there is something hard about being you." So they're tapping into your vulnerabilities. What I never want to hear said about being blank is blank. Again, with the what? These are leading questions. This is so wrong.
Yes.
This makes me like furious. And I don't think that a lot of parents, unless they already are, child psychologists or, responsible ones, or they've studied this kind of thing about, like life development and so forth, they might look at this and not really like grasp what's wrong with it. Now I'll ask you, your boss gives you this.
Mm-hmm.
Your boss gives you the same thing and says, one piece of my identity, fill it out per employee in a group where everyone can see what you're doing, and make sure you fill it out because we're going to evaluate
and then discuss it. And then discuss it
with everybody, but answer all the questions. How do you feel? Do you want to fill this out? Because nobody's asking how the kids actually feel about doing this.
Yeah.
All right. So this is really crazy abusive. And this is in a handbook from the Department of Education connected with quote unquote safely. I think safety doesn't mean what we think it means. Safely reopening schools, which is what you're going to do with the money. These are the conditions. This is what safely means for the money. Just so you know. By the way, your DEI director is going to make sure you actually do this.
Yep.
Because they're really a political stooge for the party that put all this together.
Chesterfield
even
has
if
changed
their
mission. Their mission is our mission and vision statement that has been here for 2 decades. The first thing they did when they came into office was make it equity.
Okay. And then if you were wondering, parents, how this, by the way, is a violation of many things as far as I know, but tying any kind of coercion
yes,
to a population to get them to take a medical treatment.
Yep.
All right. Like any kind of monetary incentives or coercion is, I believe it's a violation of the Nuremberg codes.
It's also domestic terrorism.
Yeah. It's so when we have
for law, I think too, but our teachers were told, get the vaccine. You won't have to wear the mask.
Right.
Day 3, I would have been on the news. Day 4, I would have had an attorney. They wore the masks for 9 more months. And still
these
today,
are the role models for your children.
Today, they still, knowing the implications it could have on their health, they still are not saying anything. They know I communicate with many teachers in this community, and they send me intel, but nobody will come forward. And
promote vaccination.
Yeah, in our schools and on school property. That's not
at all bullying or coercion or leveraging peer pressure. No, of course not. That's not. I mean. Here, use taxpayer dollars to bully the children so they can go home and bully their parents so they can be terrified. But I can't imagine why we have mental health problems. It must be because they're gay.
My daughter came home talking about how she can't handle life and needs a therapist and crazy stuff. And until I understood this, I was like, who is this kid? What is going on? Because the stuff coming out of her mouth she was talking about toxic relationships the other day. She's 11. Why are you, what do you know about toxic relationships? I
don't mean to laugh. Kids can have toxic relationships.
They're teaching
our kids the language and the thought patterns of depressed people. Cognitive distortion.
Suicide rate
microaggressions. There they are. Racism.
If you don't open the door and because you're having a bad day, then that's a microaggression that causes racial trauma. It's so maddening and implicit bias.
Well, let's not even talk about implicit bias is debunked junk science, just so you know. But let's not even talk about toxic boundaries. If you don't want to be friends with someone, if you choose to keep your own company, if you name it, you don't want to work in a group. You don't like group work. There's a lot of kids that really hate it. And some of them hate it because they have secondary issues. They're autistic and they don't want to work in a group. They just don't even know how to work. It's just not going to work. And you're telling them they have toxic boundaries.
Yeah. Or the little girl that gets chased on the playground, a boy that won't stop following them. You go to a teacher, alarming behavior that another child should not be doing, forcing themselves onto another child. The child who, instead of redirecting that child to become a better child and therefore a better human, and stop, people have boundaries. You can't, the person who went and complained to the teacher is now a bad friend and they're not being empathetic. And that's what they're teaching our kids.
Thank you, Ego Brain, so much for the super chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for being you as well. Okay.
This is one manual. Okay. I'm telling you, like, now you're going to be like me and you're going to be up at 3 a.m. clicking.
No,
and
I'm not.
storing.
You know what?
Because I've done it. You don't need to.
It's not just that, is that, as my audience who follow me, like, no, like, none of this surprises me. Like, I made the decision about what all this means on the basis of this much information. Like, I didn't need this to convince me. Now I bring it to the audience, and I bring you, and I bring all this stuff because other people need it more, need to see the stuff. And I understand that, but I don't need to dive into this except where other people can benefit from it.
Right.
I'm not going to look at it. I'm not losing any more sleep over it. It's like, why don't I just bang my head against that wall over there? All right. So anything else in this one, or should we go to something else?
Go to the yellow one I sent you. The loss in
Is that in the Google Drive, or let's see?
Yeah, or I emailed it to you separately.
It's probably one of those. Hang on, it's yellow.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I've got that. Hold on a second. So let's see. This one, I think you mean, is this it?
Yep.
Now that's just the photo of it.
Hold on.
So now I got to go to the actual manual, right?
Yep. Go to the Google Drive, and we'll be COVID impact on education. It's not, sorry, it's got the navy blue line through the center.
Got it.
Okay. This is the one that is the most disturbing because it literally lays the foundation. It tells you that they don't yet know the impact of COVID on sexual assaults in schools. So they lay the foundation for all the stuff that we're seeing now. It's not anybody's fault but COVID.
It's just COVID.
Just COVID. We don't yet know the impact.
When does it shift from COVID to Putin? I'm just wondering when that's going to happen.
When I saw that,
isn't Putin
knowing what's going on
in everything?
Knowing what's going on in this county right now, like with the bathrooms and safety issues and the sexual assault, is in reading that, I was like, they're laying anything that happens in the future, like anything, literally anything. It's COVID's fault.
Crazy. Okay.
But who did not die from COVID? Children. Like.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got to open this up, and this is weird because I downloaded it because it's kind of blurry here, but you know what? I'll just open it here. That's fine. Because I tried to open it in the, here it is. It just took a long, long time. My bad. It's just big, heavy document. Hold on a second. Share screen. I think this is it. Is this the thing?
Mm-hmm.
Message from an acting secretary. Okay,
the disparate impacts of COVID-19 on America's students.
That's where I need to go?
No, I'm just reading that's on the cover of it. And then they go,
which one do you want me to go to?
Let's see. Yeah, go to deepening disparities for students of color. That would be page 6.
Okay. Oops, I went too far, didn't I? Wait, here it is. Deepening disparities. Thank you, CB, for the super chat. You want the link to the guidebook, the one we were just looking at? I will get it for you and put it into the chat. Thank you so much.
We'll get everything to you.
Yeah, let me go grab that. Okay, so what up?
They're talking. Well, this is important because it says even before the pandemic, many students of color. Now, do you know how many Black friends that I have that saying being a person of color is like my Nana when she used to call people colored people? Like it. So many students of color face significant barriers to educational opportunity. No, they didn't. Barriers that the pandemic appeared to be making even steeper. So that's the nice blue portion right up above there. And then it talks about
this part right here.
Yeah. And then they talk about the pre-pandemic disparities that they were already experiencing.
Right.
Race-based disparities. And then it becomes, if you scroll down before they had poor outcomes. There's actually a link to the civil rights, which I think is shocking.
Fewer opportunities, poor outcomes. So they're basically admitting that we had this population, and we disaggregate the results of their outcomes, whatever that means. Okay, their scores or something. Theirs were disproportionately low based on race, and now we're going to leverage this crisis like they always do. And we're going to use the funds that were allegedly for this crisis. And we're going to say, like, okay, well, now we're going to address these problems we didn't address before with all the money we have. Instead, we hired lots of administrators, right? We had lots of administrators, didn't we? And but we're going to do it now. Now we're going to address it. What are we addressing it with? We're addressing it with SEL, gender theory, critical race theory. How does anyone else? Am I the only one going? Please show me how all this is helping them achieve academically. If they had disparate outcomes in terms of reading, math, all the stuff, even access to computers, how is having them feel better about their anxiety or whatever, feel more belonging or identify their identities? How does that help them read?
It doesn't. We had our third graders, 36% were not reading at level, but yet our curriculum next year is 323 pages with things like hip hop as literature. It reads like when I went to
Virginia, responsive and culturally relevant education,
ethnic studies. But then it's sociology, women's studies, classes that I took in college, higher education stuff.
They can't read, but they're doing sociology.
Correct. Absolutely.
But Anne, there's lots of teeny tiny words and citations. That means it must be serious. This has to be right.
That's where you find the info.
It's so small, I can't read it. So that means it's good. Yeah. It must be very scientific and official. It's very tiny writing. Okay. Anything else in this charming document about
it's long.
How we're terribly disparities in academic? Yes, we've all been aware of that. I've been yammering on about it for the last decade.
So 27 is where you get to what I was talking about, the LGBTQ children who were affected, but it wasn't white. There's none.
Right. Oh, we have the impact on English language learners. And now we go to.
But what they don't take into account, my sister teaches first grade here. And so you're teaching, as my little one creeps in right there, you're teaching children how to read with a mask on for last year, or kindergartners who had to go through kindergarten online. But when we talk about English back there, I know she's great. That's my dad. Her dad's mowing the lawn, so I'm like, but English learners, that also isn't just people that don't speak English as a second language. They don't mention the fact that all children who had to learn how to read and write with a teacher like this for an extended amount of time. What are you doing? I know. Always
do what we have to do. Yes. Okay. Yes, and that is a big problem, but of course it wasn't as big a problem for them because they don't use phonics, so they're not really worried about the sounds of the letters. Just guess what the word is. Look at the picture, look at the context clues, guess a word that might make sense there, even though your vocabulary can fit in a thimble. Go ahead, guess.
Right.
What?
But you're asking kindergartners to describe their emotions.
Do you not understand the sounds of the letters? Why? Do you need to see my lips move? I'm sorry. Is that a problem?
And so my sister said that she would pull it down sometimes and she would get scolded. Like, it's just insane. And then they wonder why kids in third grade can't read, because in first and second grade, they were.
And by third grade, they're super frustrated. So it's not just like it's taking me longer. I mean, my eldest, who was like, once she started reading, was like, didn't really start, at least that I was aware of. She told me later, she goes, Mom, I could always read. I just didn't tell you. Anyway, but she didn't really demonstrate it until she was like 7. And I was a little bit freaking out. I'm like, what's going on? And, but you see, I wasn't, there weren't lots of other kids in the class who were doing it faster or demonstrating it faster for her to feel weird about going slower. So for her, she was just kind of quietly at her own time and her own pace. And of course, we were doing phonics. And of course, I was reading to her constantly. that she just decided today's the day I'm going to announce to my mom that I need more Magic Treehouse books because I've read them all. And, I'm sitting there wondering when she's going to read Dr. Seuss. And she's like, oh, yeah, that old thing. So when you're in school, though, and they're like, let's go. They're like rushing you through this process and moving on to the next thing. And if you get to age 8, 7 or 8, and you're not reading,
right,
which is now most of the kids, 70+% of them, the feeling you have inside is not good. It's not good. The worse you're doing, the worse that feeling. And so the beginning of your walk down, I'm an anxious, depressed mess lane starts around 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Because they're not focusing on these academics the way they should be doing. And then they come to whatever grade and go, well, it must be because they're LGBTQ.
Well, what's even more tragic is all the special education, the IDEA money. Like, I know that Chesterfield got, $3 million, but we don't have aides. They're falsifying IEPs. We have extremely disabled children sitting in dirty diapers all day. Children who several mothers, like severely dyslexic children that are not identified until 4th grade. And the county is now blaming them that their child can't go into a certain grade now because they can't read. They're being charged with truancy. Where did this IDEA money go? We have no aides. We have no SPED teachers. You can pull up the personnel actions at every single school board meeting and see the SPED teacher. So what they're doing, they're falsifying IEPs, and they're putting children, and they're giving parents this false sense that their children are doing better. And they're not. And that's the fact of what we live with every single day. And the SPED kids and and that's who we try to give a voice to a lot more now, because they've been fighting alone. And so we're trying to bring the fight together because there was money specifically for them.
But Anne, these kids.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, I don't mean to be.
But the mother
make snarky remarks. This is.
But
serious
the mother
stuff.
is called. It's not our fault. This was on Facebook, court case. Stop blaming Chesterfield because you're a bad mother.
This kind of makes me crazy. What's the problem is, we all know they exist. There are lazy bad parents that exist. Okay, but let's remember that this is compulsory schooling. If you're not rich and you have to go to work and you can't find another avenue, you can't necessarily homeschool, certainly not easily, and there aren't things set up for you to do that, especially with a special ed child. It's much harder. You're going to go and use the thing that your tax dollars were already taken for, and you've got to go to work and pay the taxes in the first place. So you drop your kid off in good faith that they're going to take care of your kid. And two things happen. One, the first thing that happens is they freaking lie to you. Yep. So this notion that the parents are like aware that their kid's sitting in a dirty diaper, the fact that you might think the parent knows the kid isn't being taught anything all day, or is just warehoused in a room staring at a wall or whatever. No, they don't know. They're lying to them. They're doing all kinds of things, sometimes out of just negligence and ignorance and incompetence, sometimes out of maliciousness. It's hard to say which is which anymore, okay? Because when you take that much money and you're that, negligent, I think it's willful negligence, no matter, even if the individual on the end of it is like a clueless wonder, okay? Somebody's responsible and somebody knows what's going on. And by the time you get to where the parent is freaking out, or social services is called because the assumption is made the parent is a negligent jerk, the parent might be like the last person to find out that this is going on, or they've been lied to all along. Your kid's fine. I can't tell you how many parents I've met, not just of special ed kids, but of regular, kids who are not in special ed, who were told for years that their child was fine. They're doing fine. Yeah. But, I noticed my kid doesn't know their numbers.
Yeah, and that's what happened with this mom here, is that she kept being like, this is not normal. My child, this is not there. She's fine. She was even going to get held back 1 year. And they still told her that she was fine and she could just make it up in summer school. Yeah. But she could, as a mother, she was like, this is not right. And by the time they recognized it, she was so far behind that. And then it's a disaster.
It's not that easy. That look how hard it is to get materials removed, inappropriate materials removed from a K-12 library, pornographic materials. I just posted about it today, as did other people on Twitter. And this goes even beyond the stuff you've probably already seen. This is just like, you see it and you can't unsee it, and you can't believe this is in K-12 libraries, but there it is. And the process to get it removed
is impossible.
It's virtually impossible. So, we'll just be more involved and go to the school board meetings and do this and do that. It's like, wow, what a great idea. I wish I'd thought of it.
Go to the sheriff, because I know Virginia, there's Virginia code about obscene materials. And it's like, go to your sheriff. There's a Virginia code that nobody knows about, is that you don't have to, with 30 days, go to a school board meeting, tell them that this is going on. And you have 30 days from the grievance to go straight to the circuit court and file a complaint. Is that you have to, because going to them and telling them that you think that this needs to be changed. Because here, I don't know how it is in other states, we have 60 plus schools with 60 plus librarians ordering 60 plus different books. So what a child is exposed to should not be determined on what a librarian's agenda is, because I can tell you that my school, the only reason that my oldest is still in the public school that she's in is because she has a wonderful principal who ping pongs as much as this stuff off as he can. But 2 miles down the road, it's a different middle school that has, I'm talking woke, like the counselors that formed SEL, that formed transgender, they came from that school. And 2 miles down the road, a child should not be subjected to completely different life based on whatever the agenda of the principal or a librarian who wants to bring in beyond magenta and call it a good or a good classic or a great informative reading.
To your point, too, as we look at this section of the COVID-19 impact on LGBTQ students, I want to also point out, just as we pointed out with the Trevor Project, all of these sources, all of these sources are of one opinion. In other words, they're all from one point of view. There is nothing here that one could even reasonably call objective. They're all hard left-leaning sources, or the CDC itself.
Correct.
So self-serving, federal government telling itself what it should do. And I think we know how we feel about the CDC. So in about the last 20 minutes or so that we've got, what other things, what do we need to do to drive home the point that this ESSER stuff is being used in very specific ways to push very specific agendas? Is there anything
you can look up anybody that doesn't believe that? So like DeSantis is a great example. So
do you
DeSantis,
want to bring that up?
You can. It's a new, but it's easier to explain it. So DeSantis, because they were given the money, 2/3 of this ARP money, everybody was given, and you had to then submit an application of how you were going to implement it to get the rest. Well, DeSantis he said, there is a no mask mandate. So the counties that defied the governor, that masked them anyway, DeSantis withheld the funds. Well, what did Joe Biden do? He funded those counties anyway. So you want to talk about government overreach? So should the state shouldn't even be telling the localities what to do? They were the independent, the VDOEs of the world. We're supposed to be oversight, not policy makers, not curriculum makers. But now we have literal government education. So not only is the funding coming in, but when you have a governor who's supposed to govern their state saying, no, we're not doing this, then you have Big Brother coming in and saying, nope, I'm going to usurp you and I'm going to fund it anyway. But if it was reversed, think about if it was reversed. And that's the problem here, is that if it was the other way around, and that's the problem, is everything that we're facing right now is stuff that, like lawsuits like this against whoever, but we're not doing the same thing. We're not standing up. We're not speaking out. But Ducey is another one. Texas, it happened too. In Texas, a parent simply went before a school board and read a book, one of the books. And the school board and the superintendent were so appalled, they withheld that county's ESSER money. They withheld the money because they were not going to contribute to what this county was doing. And until the books were removed, they did not get their money. And so there's examples all over the place of what proper leadership should be doing. It's few and far between, like this one in Texas, that all that this person did was go before a school board and read a book, and they withheld the money until the books were removed. That is what leadership should be doing. And so did they take the blood money? Not until they fixed what was broken. So that's why every superintendent, no matter how great you think your county is, no matter if you got a red state November 2nd, guess what? It's still going on. Nobody's talking about it. And guess what? Nobody's going to come save them. Like, unless you get out there and this is what you're sending your kids into. And I tell people this every day, and it makes me so angry that when I became a mother, it was protect my children at all costs. And people will not come. We have 60,000 kids in mine and about 5 parents that show up. But I get intel all day. Oh, there's a Black Lives Matter assignment. There's a this, there's a that. Nobody wants to come out and talk about even their kid, their daughter being walked in on in a bathroom, or teachers sending me, well, the principal came in and made kids put masks on today, so that the appearance is that every child is still wearing masks. Okay, well, if you are knowing this is going on, you're now part of the problem, because your job as a teacher is to protect children. And if you don't agree with this and you're co-signing, it's like Nuremberg and being like, I was just doing as I was told. Like, it's.
To what do you attribute that? Do you think people are sincerely afraid of some kind of repercussion, or
Absolutely.
are they just absolutely lazy cowards?
No, these are good people that I know. And so it's very hard for me to speak out against them, because these are great educators. Is that the environment that has been created in school, and I call it mean girls, but it's worse than that. It is literal, like targeting. James River High School here. There's Coach Tony, Coach Tasha. There's Commander. They have lost so many educators from the first of the year because they spoke out against this. A man who 2 years ago was Educator of the Year, who was a gym teacher, who said this whole I'm a religious person. This goes against everything. They had him lock, stock, and barrel in 2 weeks, sitting in the office on administrative leave, and they said, you take partial retirement or you take nothing right now, because he disagreed. And that's what happens. And
this is what I've been trying to tell people when they're saying, like, well, we have to get rid of the CRT, we have to get rid of the gender this, we have to get rid of that. I'm like, yeah, you do, you totally do. But let me tell you something. If you don't get rid of DEI,
yeah,
that one person, that DEI director, or whoever is the person hiring the consultant or whatever, that expenditure on equity, having your big priority be diversity, equity, inclusion, or equity, or something like that, is what's crushing you, because that replaces superintendents. So you go ahead and you fight for a seat on the school board, and you turn the school board, which takes years, but whatever, you do it and you get on there and everything's awesome, and you hire a superintendent. The superintendent's like, I'm with you guys. We're not going to do critical race theory in the school. I'm going to tell the teachers we're not doing this. First of all, good luck enforcing that on your own teachers, first of all. Second of all, you love the superintendent. Diversity person comes in and says, you're not adhering to the equity plan. We're going to run you out on a rail. We're going to run you. And they go to the school board and they say, you're not in compliance with your equity plan. And guess what happens? If the school board refuses to remove the superintendent that's not in compliance with the equity plan, for which they get federal dollars, whether it's ESSER funds or any other kind of funds that are tied to equity garbage, then other means will be taken to remove that superintendent.
See, that's foreign to me, because I'm in a county where the collusion between the school board has essentially assigned everything. The superintendent, they're all in it together. So
that's what I'm saying, though. It's like it has become that way.
Yeah.
In large part because to make sure that you don't get these rogue situations, because it's not easy to remove rogues. I'm not making it sound like it's a snap of a fingers. They do have ways, though. And they can use things like you're violating civil rights because whatever, even though they're the ones violating civil rights, or you're not in compliance with the funding formula, blah, blah, blah. They'll come up with reasons. I guess my overarching point is incrementally remove the bad things,
Right.
like this curriculum or that curriculum or this or that. It's the entire priority system of the school district, which is really the entire priority system of your state government, which is really now, I hope we're making the point in this whole show, the priority of the federal government.
Yes.
And it's not partisan, because even though it's really bad now, it's way worse under Cardona. If you think electing a new president is going to get rid of everyone at the department, unless we get a president with real cojones, something that should have happened when Reagan was elected, because it was only a couple of years old. Unless you're talking about somebody who has the nerve and the political capital to literally get rid of the Department of Education, and or defund it, just have Congress turn to Congress and say, this is the deal.
Yeah.
We have a majority in Congress, and Congress just stands.
But that's the problem, is that the left has they don't have a problem having teeth and going after, but it breaks the Constitution. So why in the world do we live in a society with a Constitution founded on America? If you hate America, don't be here. But why is it so bad to have a president that comes in that believes in America and using the Constitution says we're not going to do something anymore that's unconstitutional? But instead of, but they can come in and say, we're going to do stuff that's unconstitutional and you can't do anything about it.
Because we're fighting racism. Because we're the good guys.
The logic.
We care about the little guy. We care about the downtrodden and the historically marginalized, even though we were the ones who put on hoods and made them historically marginalized. That was our party. Yeah. Anyway, but we're going to pretend it wasn't for a long time and rewrite history. And then we're going to accuse you guys of rewriting history because we're in a narcissistic, abusive relationship with the population of America. It's called Dargo.
Like gaslighting, like I've been gaslit my whole life. But so when I recommend, like I recognize, like when I'm not doing what you say I'm doing, you're doing what I'm saying I'm doing. Like every day, all day long, I see it all on the, you know, like it's insane. But until parents get really comfortable with the fact that they know that under the actual term of racist, I'm not racist. This doesn't make sense. And they start questioning it, because at the end of the day, you're going to answer to your child in 10 years, your grandchildren, because essentially education, I mean, there's, like Reagan said, there's no other land to discover. There's no other boat to get on.
This would be it.
This is it. There's nowhere else to go. This is our last stand. And anybody that doesn't understand the gravity of where we are in America right now, and that if you don't want to see it burn, like literally like everything collapse underneath you, you have got to grow a set and stand up for your kids and stand up for everything, because we're at the last stand right now. Like the implications of everything, it's beyond frightening. And I get that it's easier to be an ostrich and stick your head into the ground and ignore and go la 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 la. But at the end of the day, you gave birth, you adopted, you became somebody, the caregiver to a child in one manner or the other. And if you can't admit publicly that this stuff is wrong and it doesn't make any sense, and then you have people like you and me sitting here giving you the evidence, here it is, look it up, read it. I didn't make it up. It's here.
And you know, so people say, and I want to finish on a kind of a, I guess I call it an up note, or a here's what you could do note, because we've been kind of negative. But anyway, I mean,
positive stuff.
The positive thing is, you heard Anne say at the beginning, like 4,000 people have walked out. That's so far, mass exodus. Now, you know, not everyone necessarily needs to walk out. Like Anne was saying, she's got a great principal in one specific school and her daughter can get through that situation and she's monitoring it closely. Okay, you have to decide for your own family, for your own child, but we want you to be aware that this is going on. So you got to monitor this very, very, very closely for your individual kid, okay? And it could change any day, any class, any teacher, any sub. You got to monitor it very closely. Don't get complacent. But if you're in a situation where it's just untenable, I mean, your kindergartner goes into class and they're already talking about, you know, gender pronouns, you know, gender corns.
Well, that's why both my girls are coming out next year. Like,
yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah. But use the summer. We're in almost May and we're in end of April. Most parents have to find something for their kids for the summer. It's not the school. Okay. Use your summer to seriously consider getting your kid into an alternative setting. Now, I don't necessarily recommend putting all your eggs in the charter basket because you might not get in if it's lottery, and a lot of charters are not
We
better.
don't even have them. So like,
Right.
when
They're
people talk about
public,
charter
and if you're in a
schools, I'm
rural
like,
setting, it's a non-starter anyway. So, but talk to your neighbors, take
Yeah.
information like this, educate them. You don't need 20 people, 3, 4, whatever. Pool your resources. If you do shift work, figure out how you can coordinate your workloads together. If you have relatives nearby, some people, I've literally known people who've moved. I literally know people who have picked up stakes and said, I'm done with this. And they didn't move for better schools. They moved to be close to grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle, somebody. They moved to be close to a sibling. They even if it was across town, they did something to go back to more of a model of education where they took ownership of it. And it's not, mom is going to stay home and sit around the kitchen table, although that can work for many people. Some people are actually looking at their bottom line and saying, you know what? And this is true, believe it or not, for special needs kids. I'm not only taking my kid there and worrying myself sick and my kid's getting abused, I'm spending a bloody fortune on therapy and outside sources because they're not getting the help in the school. I tried hiring a lawyer. I spent a bunch of money on that. It's cheaper for me in the end of the day to not go to work, stay home, learn this stuff for myself, and figure out how to care for my child. So, you're going to come up with your own solution. But the positive thing is, thank God, for the moment, we do still have the freedom in every state in this country. Some make it a little harder. I'm not going to lie. Massachusetts makes it really hard. So does Vermont. Okay. But try to pull your kids out, enroll them in your own homeschool, whatever that will be, and then look into, like I said,
there are wonderful programs. There are wonderful teams that get together.
It is a mind-blowing amount of choices. You do not have to be the teacher. Okay, let me repeat that. You do not have to be the instructor. So you're going, I can put up with my kids, I can teach them, they won't listen to me. Okay. You are just taking ownership of administering, choosing, monitoring, and all that, and coaching your child through their years of education. What you will be amazed by is how fast they learn, how much happier they are, how much calmer and more peaceful your household is, how many hours you don't have to spend anymore looking through their Chromebook like a paranoid, what's going on?
Before I go to bed at night, I'm like, I have to look.
Yeah.
Like,
you don't have to do it. And you can go on vacation
and
whenever
this
you
place
want.
that my girls are going
because you're not around the school schedule.
Textbooks.
Yeah.
A book.
Okay. Exactly. So there is hope. It's not that or nothing. And for those of you who are like, but I feel like it is, I can't do it. It's like so hard. You believe me when I tell you, I understand where you are, and I understand you're going through a grieving process, hearing all this, like, no, what can't we fix it? And I'm like, maybe in like 25, 30 years, when everyone's dead, like, I mean, I don't know, but your kid's going to be out of school by then.
And what is
going to be the consequence of all those kids? People say, don't pull your kid out. It'll ruin the school for the rest of the kids. I'm like, I'm responsible for my kid.
Yeah.
My heart breaks, but I'm not responsible for them. Like you said, I put this child on this planet. They're my responsibility. Their brain, their psychology, their emotions, their rise to adulthood, their formation of a healthy identity and ability to attach to other people in personal relationships is my responsibility. It's not the schools. It's not the federal government. It's not the state governments. It's not my neighbor. It's not anybody else. It is me. Guess who they're going to blame when they're whatever age and they're laying on the couch or just laying in the gutter?
Yeah.
Blaming somebody. It's going to be you.
Yeah.
So the
implication, you have to think of the future. Like we were talking, like the VDOE, just real quick, being appointed is one of the things that I want. My goal is to have it, because even if Youngkin were to put an all conservative board, I think about my grandchildren, like having an appointed body by even if it's whatever side they're on, to protect all the children of a state makes no sense.
No, it doesn't.
And
it doesn't. And it's you if you stop and think about it for half a second, like if you were assigned to your grocery store, you would instantly know this is messed up. If you were assigned to, like any other thing that you need for your sustenance, but the government said, there's your house. Go live in it. Right. Okay. You'd be like, what? So why would you not want to at least look into choosing your child's education? Long ago and far away, in a faraway distant land called Hollywood School, because all the schools in Hollywood, ever notice they like look like schools in the 50s? All right. Long ago and far away, there was this thing called the school in America, which you thought you were choosing based on your zip code and your real estate prices and so forth. And you thought, I made a good choice. And you put it on par with choosing the safe car seat, the healthy food, etc. It doesn't work like that anymore. Your zip code's irrelevant. Mm-hmm. It's literally irrelevant. The property value you have, irrelevant. Okay, none of that is anything to do anymore with your school quality of education, as we've just shown you. And we're going to wrap it up, but we've just shown you, because we now have illustrated to you that billions and billions of dollars are going into standardizing the worldview of your children.
And then the teachers, we'll get into next time about how the teachers are now being funded to teach this. And that's why they want a whole new squad, which is what this money we'll get into next time, is how this money is paying for new teachers, but they have to be anti-racist leaders or culturally competent.
Exactly. So you guys keep your eyes out. You need to subscribe to the channel so you'll get notified when the next one is going to happen, when part 2 is going to happen. And Anne and I are going to come back and we're going to dive into that little piece of information.
This is just like this much we covered today, literally.
So spread the word, share it around, get it out to all your parent friends and say, did you know? Because probably they don't, through no fault of their own. It's not like the news covers this, right? No. And I cannot thank you enough. This was awesome. I thank you for all your hard work and pulling this all together for us and explaining it all. I think it was really helpful. Thanks to the audience for coming. Again, like, share, comment, subscribe. Consider coming to the locals. I've got a meeting tonight, 6 o'clock. The reason we learn.locals.com. You just become a subscriber and you can be there. So thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, guys.